Hello and welcome to MTV's brand new program, Infocus, a half-an-hour program dedicated to understanding the stories behind the stories, and perhaps the untold. Our aim is to shed light on issues and stories that are making headline through our one-on-one interviews. First on the program for 2021, what's happening to all the cash at the ATMs? In the last week or so, several ATMs in Port Moresby didn't have cash. Many customers who turned up to withdraw cash were forced to leave, resorting to electronic banking options for shopping and cash transfers. So we're privileged to have with us on the program tonight with the BSP Group CEO, Mr. Robin Flemming. So it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, so the last week or so, there were many people turning up at the ATMs, but no cash for several in Port Moresby. Tell us about basically the ATMs, first of all, and how they work and how BSP assists in this regard.
Yeah, certainly the BSP's got around about 119 ATMs in Port Moresby alone. Across the country, somewhere close to 314 to 315 ATMs. And those ATMs are used for the cash needs of many of our customers, and not just our customers, but many people who participate in the banking sector, whether they bank with any of the other banks, some of the other savings and loan societies that now have access to cards and the like. So we provide a very broad and diverse range of ATMs to give as many people as possible access to cash. And when you have a look at the statistics and the numbers, as say in Port Moresby alone, 119. I think in total around the country, Kina Bank would have about 80 ATMs, and Westpac probably got around about 50 or 60 ATMs. ANZ, since it moved out of retail banking and relies solely on commercial and corporate banking now, it doesn't provide any ATMs at all around the country. But just based on those statistics alone, BSP's got 3 times as many ATMs all around PNG and a large predominance of ATMs in Port Moresby. The ATMs hold a variety of currencies. We've got our 100 Kina notes, the 50 Kina notes, and some of them even dispensing 20 Kina notes. And on average, our ATM fleet around the country can consume between 60 to 80 million Kina a week in currency.
Wow, so there's the reality on the ground.
Huge amount of currency. And as you'd expect, that's a pretty difficult logistical exercise to get cash, the right type of cash, into ATMs in PNG and especially in Port Moresby. Yeah,
so speaking of currency, each individual ATMs have, we see BSP trucks coming and then I think refilling these ATMs. Tell us about the process. How does it work? You get notified by these ATMs electronically, or people place complaints for this to be assessed and attended to? How does it work?
We've got a relatively sophisticated monitoring program. We've got a centralised area which monitors the various issues which affect an ATM being available. Cash in particular, monitor the cash in the various dispensers or cassettes in the ATM. We monitor some of the other reasons that can contribute to ATMs being unavailable, which can be as simple as the paper for the receipts not being there. Could be a card that's been jammed in the ATM. Can also be that the note quality isn't of sufficient quality and we'll have a note jam. And based on that data, which is sent out 4 times a day to everyone all around PNG that's involved in supporting the ATMs, that enables us to plan the cash top-ups, which is the most time-consuming aspect of it. It could also enable us to send some of our branchless banking officers or ATM technicians to a particular ATM site to assess, do some of the work that's required to bring the ATM back online. And particularly in provincial areas, but sometimes it can happen in Port Moresby as well, ongoing power outages and blackouts can disrupt the ATMs, which may well mean that we have to reset and reboot the ATM.
So there's a whole lot of process going into making sure that this service is provided to our people throughout Papua New Guinea. And now the situation we saw last week, can you shed some light on that again?
just going back to the number of people, got about 120 to 150 people in BSP countrywide who are involved with monitoring, supplying, sustaining and delivering our ATMs to our customers. The ATMs require a certain quality of note, and one of the reasons that there's been a large concentration on the 50 kina and 100 kina notes is that generally they've been of better quality. If we put cash into an ATM which is a little bit dirty, torn, may well have folds in it, then the likelihood of that ATM having a cash note jam or the cash not being suitable and going into divert bins can increase, which means that the ATM isn't available. It'll say it's not dispensing a note, cash, but it doesn't mean that cash isn't in the ATM. What we have found in recent months, and Bank of PNG has probably seen it somewhat more, is that whilst there's a large number of 50 kina notes in circulation around PNG, that could be as high as 500 million kina, and a large number of 100 kina notes in circulation around PNG, which could be up to 1 billion kina, there's only about 1/3 of those notes sitting with all the commercial banks in currency. And as a result, the availability of the 50 kina and 100 kina notes in good quality there's not as many of them at the moment as there have been in months gone by. Now, there can be a number of contributing factors to that, and we have a look at the various social media, and some of it says that perhaps it's to do with banks wanting to force people into electronic channels, and we certainly encourage people to use electronic, but we're not trying to force you, we're just trying to explain to people there are other ways of doing your banking without relying on cash. But certainly there would appear to be a large number of businesses who aren't bringing cash into banks as readily or as rapidly as they should.
All right. This is Infocus, MTV's newest program. We will be back with more on the other side. Welcome back to the program. We still have with us our good CEO from BSP, Mr. Flemming, for the second part of the half-hour program. So continuing on from where we left off, regarding your comments last week on the availability of good quality notes to put into the ATMs, this is what the governor for BPNG, the central bank, had to say. They're good at blaming the central bank, but they don't do their part by encouraging cash deposits from public and corporates. If they need deposits, they have to create facilities for cash deposits and even increase interest rates. That's normal banking business. In addition, they didn't return bad or soiled notes to the central bank too. If they collect lots of deposits, then they can reuse fit notes back in their ATMs. Most times, central bank has been issuing clean banknotes without banks returning old notes. Your response to that?
Yes, certainly Bank of PNG has been providing a lot of good, clean, new 50 kina and 100 kina notes, and in many instances those notes will go into our ATMs, not just in Port Moresby, but all around the country. And the currency in circulation will often go to stores, and those stores aren't always in Port Moresby. They will be in many other provinces as well. And for whatever reason, certain businesses always feel the need that they want to deal with cash and not necessarily deposit that cash back into the bank. We see this particularly in the provincial areas where we have our bank managers who will call at stores who've receive a lot of those 50 kina and 100 kina notes from customers who take the cash out of our ATMs and ask them to deposit with BSP or with some other bank. It doesn't have to be with BSP. BSP certainly has a lot of liquidity to ensure that our customers' deposits are preserved, and the other banks have been supportive of providing notes to BSP in need, and ANZ in particular has provided a lot of notes to BSP, Kina Bank and Westpac. And we also see in some of the provincial areas where Westpac will be providing currency to BSP. But for various reasons, some of those businesses want to retain that cash for their own purposes, and it isn't always to do with the interest rate or the rate of or the return that they get on those deposits. Sometimes it can be avoiding various means of
Tax,
GST
example,
and tax. And BSB certainly agrees with Bank of PNG that there needs to be more awareness for businesses, encouraging businesses to deposit cash back into circulation. And when we talked to Bank of PNG about note quality, we was also just trying to differentiate between soiled notes, those that are not fit for circulation, whether it's in my wallet, your wallet, or someone else's purse, and the notes which are fit for an ATM. And there is a bit of a difference between those. And a lot of our notes can be used for circulation, but they're not good enough quality to put into ATMs. For the ATMs.
That's correct. Now, so Seb, with regards to the notes, reused notes, does the bank usually return them back to BPNG for use?
So the soiled notes, we send the soiled notes back to Bank of PNG, as do all banks. If they're not fit for circulation, we bundle them up and send them to Bank of PNG regularly. But there is still a bit of a gap between the notes that Bank of PNG issues as new and those which come back as soiled and those which are in the banking system in total. If there's about 2 billion kina, for example, worth of currency in circulation, only around 500 million of that's with the banking system. So we're always trying to encourage customers to deposit those notes. We'd have no need for the actual value. We've got plenty of liquidity, but to deposit the notes with BSB or some other bank so they can be put back into circulation.
Okay. So, Mr. Flemming, there is also the concern that, it costs to make money, to make currency. So I think that's probably one of the delays that you see.
It does cost. It also costs BSB to transship currency all around PNG. We know commercial flights will take cash from any bank, but especially BSB, because we're the ones that operate in all the provinces, and we have to supply the air charters to get cash all around PNG. So it costs a lot of money to move and transport cash. And I know that some of the social media commentary has also been around some of the questions that BSB and possibly other banks ask a customer when they bring cash in. And it's important to recognise that with the introduction of the AML, Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Finance Acts, all banks have an obligation to ask their customers when they deposit cash that is not consistent with their normal activity, what the source of cash is. Now, we could possibly be better.
That's standard practice.
That's standard practice now. If you have large amounts of cash, the bank will ask what the source of that cash is. And that's our obligation. We could be better at asking those questions and how we make people feel less comfortable about that. But that can also be reasons why some people, or businesses in particular, are reluctant to deposit large amounts of cash. But equally, it's our obligation to ask those questions.
True. So going back to the simple banknotes coming out from the ATMs, you've noticed there are many Papua New Guineans who just remove cash from the ATMs without putting it into a wallet. These are polymer notes. They just shove it into their pockets and they go off. I think that's probably one of the reasons why we are seeing a lot of notes get damaged.
Correct. The creasing, the folding can make them not fit for ATMs, and also recognise that people think that some of our electronic banking channels may be a little bit costly. Well, let's see how we can reduce the fees on particularly the lower value transactions, but it creates a lot of work for banks to top up an ATM outside a supermarket, and then the customer takes that cash back into the supermarket and spends it. And then when it has to come back into the bank will then have our 20 or so staff at a cash distribution, sorting those notes, counting the notes. So trying to get people to recognise that we know that there will be certain transactions in PNG which you can't avoid using cash for, whether it's the market, fish market, other forms of transactions. But for supermarkets, to try use your card rather than taking the cash out of the ATM and then transporting that cash to a supermarket who's only got to count it and bring it back to BSB.
True. Interesting conversations with Mr. Flemming. You're watching Infocus. More of this conversation on the other side. Thank you for your company on In Focus, Mr. Flemming. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you once again. There are a lot of questions on social media. One in particular, is BSP short of money?
Definitely not. BSP is not short of money. BSP is a very profitable, well-capitalised bank. It's the largest bank in PNG. Our total risk-weighted capital, which is one of those key critical measures that central banks around the world and Bank of PNG in particular uses to determine the capital soundness of any bank, which is its capability to meet on demand the cash and deposits of our customers. We're very sound. We're about 23% risk-weighted capital. We've got a lot of surplus liquidity, almost 500 million kina sitting in surplus liquidity in an exchange settlement account with Bank of PNG. We've got more than adequate liquidity, not just to meet the loan demand of our customers, but also the capability to purchase currency as and when needed. And just touching on the loans, I know it's a little bit of a distraction, diversion from the cash. The total lending in 2020 across the banking system probably reduced it by about 200 million kina, whereas BSP continued to lend to many of our customers, and our lending increased by 400 million kina. Despite that increase in lending, large values of currency sitting with the Bank of PNG, our deposits in an exchange settlement account. So we've got very liquid, certainly the capability to buy currency as and when available or to meet any deposit requirements and withdrawals from our customers.
In terms of the money in the economy right now, you as a bank, we see the number of deposits, the withdrawals. Is there enough cash circulating in the economy?
There's enough cash circulating in the economy, and this is one of the issues that Bank of PNG sees. There's more than enough cash, but it's not with the commercial banks. And that's what we need to do to incentivise people, encourage people to bring the cash, the currency in circulation into banks so it can be recirculated, because it doesn't do Bank of PNG any good to continue to have to print notes and add more and more currency into the country either. And we do have to encourage people to start using electronic transactions for various transactions rather than banking transactions rather than using cash all the time.
All right, so there are certain commentators on Facebook talking about the fact that many Asian businesses are not banking money. And as you said earlier on in your comments, you spoke about the businesses in the provinces. Is that true?
Yeah, it's definitely true. There's businesses in the provinces who don't bring their cash into the bank. And we do have our branch managers visit those businesses, encouraging them to deposit the cash. They say they have other uses and means for the cash, and it may well be that they use the cash to purchase from other wholesalers or the like in other provinces rather than putting into the bank and using a typical and normal payments method. But that does contribute to the absence of currency in circulation.
All right. So you did speak about the international best practice, which is when people come with large sums of cash, they usually go through a process whereby they ask them where they get this amount of money. Are we seeing in Papua New Guinea individuals or businesses for that matter removing large amount of cash?
I wouldn't say removing large amounts of cash. The cash is available for distribution. It's that's not always coming back into circulation. And possibly in rural areas we can do a little bit more to encourage people to deposit cash that they earn from agricultural activities into the bank, and also from our perspective that when our bank officers and tellers ask those questions, we're able to understand what their real income earning capacity is. If you're a taro seller and you're selling 1,000 kina worth of taro a week in the market and you bring 1,000 kina in, we note that in our history on our customer's computer file, and then when they come back the next week for the 1,000 kina, that we don't ask the same question every time and make someone feel a little embarrassed because they are bringing cash in. But equally, if you're a taro grower and you only have 1,000 kina a week and one day you're bringing 100,000 kina, then you're going to expect someone to ask some questions.
Yeah. So 2021, what's your assurance to BSP customers?
BSP customers, that we're going to continue to develop in and promote our electronic banking channels. That is the future. It is a means of being able to reduce the need for cash. We also understand that not all customers can take access or use those electronic banking transactions in all their facilities, which does mean that we have to expand some of our branches in the more rural areas, particularly those where there is a lot of agricultural activity, to ensure that we've got a multifaceted approach that deals with the increasing digital demands of customers such as yourself who want to use an internet payment gateway, who want to use your card to purchase goods overseas, who want to use your cards and internet for other types of transactions, but at the same time ensure that we do have our capabilities in place to provide access to banking services for rural customers.
Mr. Flemming, it was a pleasure having you on the program. We've come to the end. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, and it's been great to be here. Good evening.
EMTV's In Focus. If you have comments on our discussions tonight, join us on our Facebook page and we will be happy to hear from you. See you same time next week. Bye for now.